Thank you, Rudy. Can everyone hear me in the back?
Yeah.
Yes.
Great. I wasn't expecting that kind of introduction from me as the moderator today, but thank you. I appreciate that. This is the biggest crowd I've seen at a DEMOS World Policy event in this room. And I'm really just amazed because, and I think I know why. There's two reasons. One is because we're here to discuss what is arguably the most important question of the early 21st century, and that is how much is enough? As the climate crisis reaches a peak, and as global recession has hit in, we're realizing that it's going to take 3 to 4 generations of innovation to reach a carbon neutral society. And in the meantime, it would take 5 additional planets if everyone consumes at the level of the average American. So we have to look very deeply at this question of how much is enough. And I think that we could not have a better group of innovators and people at the cultural edge of this question here tonight than we do. And I'm extremely excited to present this panel. And before I do, just to say that this is part of the World Policy Institute's Redefining Prosperity project, which I manage there. And the whole 12 by 12 book, which came out last year, was part of this idea of getting these ideas out into the mainstream culture about simplicity and about how much is enough. So this is kind of the one of the culminating events of this Redefining Prosperity project, House of WPI. So let me just go ahead and introduce our panelists, and I'm going to embarrass them and ask each of them to, just in 10 seconds, tell something that we don't already know about them, because many of you have read their work or seen their films. So just starting at the end, we have David Abram, who just flew in from Santa Fe, New Mexico. He, as many of you know, is perhaps the most interesting environmental philosopher out there. In the mid-90s, everybody was reading his book, The Spell of the Centuries. I see people smiling who have read it, because it's read in like almost every environmental studies program around the country. And he's just such a deep, rich thinker, many awards, one of the visionaries changing the world at the magazine. Dave, what's one thing about yourself that we don't know?
That I have 2 very bodacious kids, now 7 and 10. One of whom is with me out here in New York, and one who's back in northern New Mexico, and it's the first time the 2 of them have been apart. And so that's just part of the dance.
All right.
This week for me.
Well, thank you, Dave. Thank you very much. Okay, so Colin Bevan is here as well. How many people have seen No Impact Man? Okay, so about maybe half the people here. He was the star of this documentary film looking at how to live basically carbon neutral in New York City. And he's been on all the major New York NPR programs and PBS and everything. And he's really done a great job of getting this message out there into the culture. So you guys all have bios of these folks, so you can read them. But what's one thing about yourself that we don't know?
Since Dave stole the fatherhood thing, I was thinking of saying I'm not wearing any underwear, but I am. So most of you probably didn't know that. I think, no socks, yeah. I think what I probably want to add to being the author of No Impact Man is that I am the executive director of the No Impact Project, and what is particularly interesting to me about that is that that it's a project where citizens engage themselves in trying to do what they can about changing the environmental agenda here in the United States, and we've had some 30,000 or 40,000 people go through the program already, which speaks, I think, to how many people really care, and it's just a question of giving them channels to care, ways of caring, ways of getting involved.
Okay, fantastic. And now we have Vicki Robin, who her book, Your Money, Your Life, with Joe Dominguez, was one of those books that definitely changed my life back in college many years ago. After I read that, I did cut up my credit cards, like you recommend, and I've never had credit cards since, so I've never had a debt on a credit card. And I took her idea about financial independence very seriously. The fact that we give less of our time to the marketplace and more to the things that we really care about and love, and therefore become more creative and more innovative. So thank you for that gift back then, Vicki, and thank you for being here. Since then, I mean, she's started up so many institutions, including the Center for the New American Dream and others. For decades, she's been at the edge of the voluntary simplicity issue in this culture, as many of you know. So, do you want to tell us one more thing about yourself?
Yeah, I'm part of an improv comedy group called Comedy Island from Whidbey Island, and our tagline is, "We think we're funny." Sometimes it's we think we're funny. Yeah, so I'm proud of that. And the other thing is I'm now writing a new book on local food called Blessing the Hands That Feed Us.
Okay. And finally, we have Sheena Matikin, and she is here from the Uniform Project. She started this little black dress experiments, which we're going to talk about in a minute. And she's also been recognized around the world for her work in raising money for children and education projects in India through this very innovative idea of wearing the same style of dress for the entire year. And here we are around the fashion district of New York, so it's great to have her here. One thing about yourself?
I'm actually Irish, which I don't think a lot of people know about me. It's true. I'm actually red-headed, but I'm not. This is my real color. But I was born in Ireland and then moved back to India when I was about 4. And I grew up, pretty much spent all my childhood and formative years in India. So I'm hoping that I can offer some, Asian perspective onto this conversation. A little bit, but not that much. I've lived in New York for 12 years, so I don't know how up-to-date my knowledge is. But
wonderful. And we're actually going to start with you, Sheena, because we want to look at the lifestyle level first of this question, how much is enough, before we move up to other levels. And what I want to ask you is, tell us about the Uniform Project. What did you do with this little black dress for a year, and what did you learn from it? What was the impact?
I don't know how many of you know about it. Quickly, the exercise was to wear one little black dress for a whole year, and it was really about reinventing the same dress to make it look different every day without buying anything new. So my challenge was to accessorize with vintage and thrift store finds and things pre-owned or things that were donated to me through others. So it really, for me, was about exercising a limitation and a constraint and using it as a creative exercise, and to prove that we can approach these issues of sustainability and overconsumption as sacrifice. And I think that's what most people shy away from this whole conversation, because it's often portrayed as what you have to give up and how is it going to impact my life. And I really wanted to turn that on its head and make this more of a fun, creative exercise to prove that limitations can actually really bring out the better in us, and that we can actually get more creative and have fun with it. So that was sort of the gist of it.
Okay, wonderful. And actually, there's a parallel, I think, with Colin's work with the No Impact Project. What was your experiment that you did for a year, and what did you learn from it? What can we learn from that experiment?
So the No Impact year was about my family and I living as environmentally as possible here in New York City for a year, which meant like not making trash, not using any carbon-producing transportation, not eating food outside 100 miles. It wasn't about recycling. It wasn't, because it's not called moderate impact, man. It was like, don't make trash at all, and et cetera, until finally the idea was that we would reduce our negative impact as much as possible, and then increase our positive impact by volunteering and giving back to the environment. So the idea was that increased positive impact plus reduced negative impact would make no negative impact, no environmental impact, which any environmental scientist will tell you makes no sense whatsoever. But philosophically, the question basically was, is it possible for a human being to live doing more good than harm? And as far as what we learned, Bill started off by saying, how much do we have enough? And I would argue, maybe what you don't expect me to say is that I would say we have way less than enough, that we are severely deprived. But what we're deprived by is being part of this consumptive cycle, working our butts off too many hours to get stuff that we don't want or need, but we have to have because it's a consolation prize for the fact that we don't have things like community or security or friendship. And what we learned during the No Impact year is that we expected that we were going to be kind of wearing the horsehair shirt and serving some sort of penance. We are bad, we are human beings, we hurt the planet, so therefore I'm going to not have impact, right? But actually what happened is we got rid of the TV. We found that our friends came over more so that we could, because we had to have some sort of entertainment, so we played charades. And as I often say, people call me anti-progress, but I always say, how much progress is it if we're not playing charades as often as we used to? Or the fact that we ended up eating food that was good for us, or the fact that we ended up transporting ourselves using our actual bodies and muscles and not exercise. So that actually what happened is we reclaimed part of our humanity as a result by giving up the consumptive lifestyle. So the kind of final conclusion is, well, two conclusions. One is that which we must do for the planet, ultimately, to make a happier planet means that we can find a path towards a happier people at the same time. And the second, maybe more subtle meta message was that there are many, many important ways for citizens to get involved in the discourse outside the voting booth. Because I started out as a disempowered citizen and found that by using my voice in a way that had integrity with my values and my skills, I actually had way more power than I thought. And I don't think that that's unique to me, but something that if we all can marry our passions and our concerns, we have incredible power to change the world.
Okay, Vicky, you've seen over the last couple of decades, and you've studied this. I mean, put this in context for us. These two experiments of the Uniform Project and the No Impact Project. I mean, there have been all these movements trying to push the voluntary simplicity agenda and stability in the states, and they've not taken traction in mainstream culture as much as we might like, right? So, do these types of things have an effect? And if so, how?
I believe that these, first of all, hi everybody. I'm not used to sitting like this. We should be sitting in a circle and all saying our names and singing Kumbaya. But it is actually part of the American story that every generation has a subset, call it 20%, who are doing a lifestyle experiments exactly along these lines. I mean, we're actually a very moral people. I mean, we've been characterized in so many ways, but when I traveled 2 decades ago, first traveling to talk about your money, your life, and frugality as a way of life, and really, getting ready for the Rotten Tomatoes, I couldn't find anybody who didn't claim that they were frugal. It's part of our character to be smart shoppers, to make the most of things, use it up, wear it out, make it do or do without. That was the Depression era. Every year, according to David Shai, who was an author who studied the history of simplicity in America, every generation has people like us in it who remind the rest of our generation of that set of values that we consider part of who we are. I did, when I was younger, I sort of thought we would succeed, that everybody would do it, and by now we wouldn't be talking about it's a 3-generation project to turn the tide. I thought we were going to turn the tide in the 90s, we weren't going to have to talk about remediation. But I was young and I believed that. But now I can see that what's important about experiments like these, about my own life, about books, about Bill's book, what's important about all of these is we're carrying a torch that is not antithetical to the American character and the American dream. It is actually an expression of the American character and the American dream. Freedom in America was not originally the ability to consume. The idea of consumerism as freedom is the advertising industry has commandeered a core American value and repurposed it to sell products. That's not who we are. Simplicity is not a lifestyle. Simplicity is not a set of products. Simplicity is part of our character. It's this idea of that you have a sufficient amount of things so that you can actually be closer to God. I mean, this is actually part of the American character. It's all of the Puritans, all about being able to have a direct relationship with the source of our existence, whatever we call that, and not be so constrained by cultural norms. So the fact that this has all gotten perverted to be a product-oriented set of values is really not